Five Nights at Freddy's is huge. The impact it's had on the internet and the gaming landscape is undeniable. I've been following the franchise on and off ever since like FNAF 2, and out of the many phenomenons that were caused by this series, the thing that always drew me in the most was the fan games. There are a lot of Five Nights at Freddy's fan games. Like, I think it's fair to say that FNAF is the most fan-gamed franchise ever. And, you know, I think there's actually a really good reason for that. And it's not just because FNAF is popular. So, to celebrate FNAF's 10th anniversary and Halloween, I want to answer not only why there's so many FNAF fan games, but also why I think you might want to try making one. And also, just to be clear, when I say fan game, I'm only talking about games that play like the classic Five Nights games. So like, no 3D free roaming stuff, just good old 2D point-and-click resource management gameplay. Okay, let's say you want to make your first game, so you tell yourself, I know, I'll try making something simple, like a platformer. That's like the most basic kind of game, isn't it? But what you didn't realize yet is that even for a simple platformer, you still have to code a lot of things. I've always said that it's crucial that you start with really simple games, but like, sure, I get it. You want to make something a bit more complicated than just Flappy Bird or Snake, right? Well, this is where FNAF comes in. FNAF is technically a point-and-click game, and that's a lot easier to code. It's really as simple as, if sprite clicked, do this, or if mouse hovering this, do that. And for the most part, that's it, barely any math to worry about. But if coding enemy AI sounds intimidating, there's a few really good videos that explain how the FNAF AIs work. And it's actually a lot simpler than you'd think. I recommend you check one out and copy the same principles. Another advantage is the amount of assets you need to make. In most games, you explore a lot of unique areas, and each new place requires brand new assets that quickly pile up. But in a FNAF game, you basically get to recycle the same assets for every level, which means you can get a lot more gameplay out of a lot less work. It's a great balance if you want to make something with actual meat on it without overwhelming work. It also means that FNAF games can be made pretty quickly, so you're much less likely to abandon the project from scope creep or just losing interest. Like I just said, making a FNAF game doesn't take a whole lot of time compared to other genres. And what's cool about smaller projects like these is that every small new thing you add feels like a big step towards the goalpost, and it feels really gratifying and rewarding. If you're still in school, it's the kind of project you could easily make over the winter or summer breaks. And when you come back, you can show it to all your friends, which then leads to the best part, the reactions.
What's that?
When you watch someone getting jump scared by your game, and it actually makes them jump, it's so satisfying. You feel absolutely devious. Let me tell you, it's great. But on the other hand, what's really strange is getting jump scared by your own game. If you didn't expect it and it catches you off guard, it's such a weird feeling. I don't know for other people, but for me, I would go from being scared to being angry to embarrassed to laughing, all in the span of like a second. The sheer absurdity of being scared by your own creation is a surreal experience. That's when you know you got something good. Now, to get back on topic, the main reason why I would guess it's so fun for so many people is the characters. While some fan games will either reuse Freddy and the gang or take an existing IP and put a FNAF twist on it, a lot of them will instead use their own original characters. And for a good reason. Unlike with making other clone games, this time the characters aren't just a snake or a bird. No, it's your own characters that you basically get to see come to life in a way. Thanks to FNAF's formula as a horror game, you can make the characters feel somewhat alive with just a few sprites and very basic AI. And that's kind of a special thing that I think nothing else but FNAF can quite replicate. And then, the only really hard part is to make the game scary. Unless... At its core, FNAF is a horror game, we all know that. But being scary is really difficult. Even for FNAF itself, one of the most common complaints was, "It's not that scary, actually." You may think it's scary at the start, when you don't know what's going on, but usually by the time you get to the end, you figured out how the game works, and dying isn't scary, it's just frustrating. Which is why I would like to argue that well-designed and fun gameplay is much more important than being scary. As an example, let's take FNAF 4. I still think it's the scariest game in the series. I hate playing it, it makes me uneasy. But if you remove the horror aspect, the gameplay is basically just 4 music boxes when you think about it, and no one likes the music box mechanic. So if you don't think the game is scary, well, you're left with nothing. Now, understandably, you still want your game to be at least somewhat scary, in which case, you can use stress to your advantage. I would say that it's a lot easier to make something stressful than something scary, and stress is kind of a form of fear, I think. Isn't it? I say it counts. But how do you make something stressful, you may ask? Simple, with multitasking. My favorite kind of fan games are the ones where you have to manage a bunch of things at the same time. I think it's super satisfying, and I love it. And regardless of if you think the game is scary or not, you'll still have a fun challenge to play. And, I mean, there's an entire sub-community of people dedicated to finding and beating the hardest challenges out of any FNAF-like game. So, yeah, if you're making a fan game, don't worry too much about being scary. Instead, worry about being fun and well-designed first and foremost. And speaking of design, I think that there's a lot to be learned from FNAF from a game design standpoint. For example, how do you teach the mechanics to the player? Cause in horror, the more you know and understand, the less scary something becomes. And I think horror games are at its best when you're never quite fully sure if what you just did actually worked or not. But if the player doesn't understand anything, well, they're just gonna die without knowing why and be frustrated. So there's a very delicate balance to nail here. You have to make sure your mechanics are super self-explanatory, but you can't give away everything either. Unless you wanna go for the stressful route, in which case it's fine to explain everything, cause then you can get away with making the game much more complicated, and thus much more stressful. Another design problem is, how do you make sure the player can't abuse or ignore any of the game mechanics? 'Cause there's absolutely a good and a bad way to go about it. Security cameras, arguably the main mechanic of the whole franchise, often falls victim to these kinds of problems. In FNAF 1, you want to use the cameras because knowledge makes you feel safe. But that safety comes at the cost of draining your power, which in turn just makes you more scared. And that's genius design. Until the player realizes, hey, wait a minute, I don't need the cameras, I can just check the door lights. And so Scott saw this and went, Foxy. Bam, fixed. It's even worse in FNAF 2 with the music box having the complete opposite effect and just making every single camera totally useless. FNAF 3 did the cameras great though. Good job. Where I'm going with this is that you should try to make the player feel like they want to use a mechanic, instead of making them feel like they have to because the game says so. When you're making a FNAF game, each problem has a lot of room for creative solutions. I think that's one more reason for why so many fan games can take the same formula while still feeling new. And if you aren't making a FNAF game, well, hey, you now know that making a FNAF fan game is easy, fun, can teach you some game design, and it doesn't have to be scary as long as it's good. But I feel like we're still missing something. One more reason for why there's so many of them. Okay, I have a bit of a guilty pleasure to admit. Sometimes, when I'm bored, I like to go on GameJolt, go to the FNAF category, then sort by new, and just play anything that comes up. Most of these games are of low quality. They're just not good. But the thing is, it's not always boring bad. Instead, a lot of them are funny bad. Some will be self-aware and are made badly on purpose with the express goal of being funny. And if you're really lucky, you might find something that's genuinely not half bad. You truly never know what you'll find. I highly recommend it. Now, some of you might be tempted to point and laugh and say, lol, it looks like it was made by a 12-year-old. But if that's the case, then I think it's all the more impressive. And I would know because, well, I've been there. The very first time I seriously tried learning how to make games was because I wanted to make a FNAF game. Allow me to share with you a bit of a personal story. I have been coming up with game ideas basically my entire life, and back in 2015, I was in the midst of my FNAF kid phase. So, unsurprisingly, I had a bunch of ideas for FNAF fan games, and for some reason, I decided to finally try making a real game. So, I downloaded Game Maker and looked for a tutorial. And that's when I stumbled on this video, How to Make a FNAF Game in Game Maker Studio by Ricky G. A 52-minute long tutorial with a sped-up version of DKC's Aquatic Ambience playing the whole time. I know this song is nostalgic for a lot of people, and it is for me too, except that whenever I hear it, I get reminded of Five Nights at Freddy's. For what felt like days, I would watch this video and try to copy everything as best I could. 'Cause I had big plans for my FNAF game, but I actually had the foresight of starting with a super basic test game first. 4 cameras, 1 animatronic, a door and a light. You couldn't get any more basic than this. I thought, it's so bare bones, there's no way I wouldn't be able to do this. But then, something didn't work. It was the first ever bug in my game dev career. I thought I did everything right. I copied everything he did. Why is it working for him, but not for me? I thought. Since I was just blindly following the tutorial, I didn't learn anything. I didn't understand what I was doing or how it worked, so I had no way of finding out what the bug was. I guess I was just too young and Game Maker was still too complicated for my 12-year-old brain. And in the end, I gave up. I think I tried making a few more Game Maker projects, but nothing ever worked. Now, this story does have a good ending. 5 years later, in 2020, I knew how to use Scratch, and so I made the full FNAF game idea that I envisioned back when I was 12. And then I made another one in Click Team Fusion, the same engine Scott Cawthon himself used to make FNAF. So why am I telling you all of this? Well, it's a reminder that we all gotta start somewhere, and we're all bad at the start. But I would have never gotten where I am today if I had just never started. And it's for that reason that I genuinely think it's amazing how this franchise has made countless people try their hands at making games. And I mean, it's not like they're sloppily made just to make money. No, you legally can't make money from FNAF Fangames, which means that behind each one of those games is someone who tried and actually made something without expecting anything in return. That's already a lot more than I can say about Roblox users, am I right? So, at the end of the day, as long as they learned something and had fun, who cares how bad it is, right? And hey, if you have made a FNAF fan game before, I would love to know what made you want to do it and what you enjoyed the most about making it. 'Cause after all, this video was mostly just my own speculations. In other words, I guess you could say this video was just a theory, a game dev theory. Thanks for watching.